Shopping for a new car? The imports have a surprise for you.
Back in 1965, the name Delta was added as a trim designation for the 88, Oldsmobile's most profitable model at the time. Although the 88 previously had other prefixes, such as Super, Deluxe, or Royale, the Delta name would become the most popular, from the huge land yachts of the early 70s to the comparatively small front-drive models of the mid-80s.
Sporty enough for me,
but roomy enough for all of us.
The Delta name was officially dropped from the 88 in 1989, but as a kid back then, I best remember my father's Oldsmobile as the Delta 88. This is the story of the Oldsmobile Delta 88. This is my old car.
Our Delta 88 is the family car that didn't forget the family. Some things never change.
borrow the car, Dad?
Some things never change. If it's at all possible, try to save the car.
Although I will provide some info on the 88s that preceded and followed the Delta, I decided to make the focus of this episode be on the Delta 88 model, as that is the version I remember best as a kid. My dad used to work for GM and always had company cars, and I am pretty sure he had at least one Delta 88, probably two, as he was about as far from a sports car fan as one can get. Yes, it was definitely my father's Oldsmobile, despite the famous ads that tried to say otherwise. I remember the ads as a kid as well, and they kept saying,
"This is not your father's Oldsmobile."
And I would reply, no, it is. The origin of the 88 name came from a post-war naming convention that Oldsmobile followed for all of its models, with the first digit representing the chassis designation, and the second digit being the number of engine cylinders. At its debut in 1949, the 88 was slotted between the smaller 76 model and the larger 98 model, the latter lasting almost as long as the 88 did. The 88's 5-liter V8 engine was promoted as the Rocket V8 and could be considered a muscle car for its time, with a then impressive 135 horsepower. This also led to the creation of the Rocket logo that Oldsmobile would later adopt across its entire model line and keep until the mid-90s. This first-gen 88 was on the GM A body, but would switch to the larger B body for the second gen in 1954.
It's the going straight in an 88. It's a driver's dream come true.
And would stay with the B body through 1985. Chevrolet, Pontiac, and Buick would continue a long-lasting tradition of sharing the B body for their models. Also typical for these decades was offering every possible passenger car body style: coupes, sedans, hardtops, convertibles, and even station wagons, the latter starting for the 88 in 1957. As was more typical in the 50s and 60s as compared to later decades, subsequent generations only lasted 2 or 3 years each, so the 88 was already finishing its 5th generation by 1964. During this time, the 88 was Oldsmobile's most popular model, and was typically not advertised as just the 88, but instead the Dynamic 88, the Jetstar 88, or the Super 88. The Fiesta name was used for the wagon, and a rare find today, as wagon sales for the 88 were slowing so much by 1964 that Oldsmobile dropped them from the lineup, being replaced by the Cutlass-based Vista Cruiser in 1964. The second 8 in the 88 name continued to represent its Rocket V8 engine, topping out in 1964 with 394 cubic inches and 345 horsepower. The Delta 88 name was first introduced for the 6th generation that started in 1965, initially being considered as a higher trim level of the Dynamic 88 to be called the Dynamic 88 Delta. Oldsmobile soon after shortened it to just be the Delta 88. The 6th gen introduced more Coke bottle styling as opposed to the hard lines and edges of the 5th gen.
On the flight line now at your Olds dealer.
A more radical fastback design arrived in 1967, and a new Delta 88 custom trim was offered, with more plush seats that for 88s with bucket seats were called Moroccan tufted Strato buckets. The following year, 1968, introduced a new front end with a split grille that would become an Oldsmobile styling standard going forward, and help give Oldsmobile some identity as compared to other GM cars that shared the B body, such as the Buick LeSabre, Pontiac Bonneville, and Chevy Bel Air. Although still officially part of the 6th gen, since the underlying chassis design remained the same, the 69 model had a longer wheelbase and redesigned the rear window to have less of a fastback look. A staple of nearly all cars for the previous 2 decades, the vented windows between the windshield and the front doors were gone, as air conditioning became more cost-effective and more popular, eliminating the need for the side window vents. The largest engine was the massive 7.5-liter 455 cubic inch V8, still marketed as the Rocket V8. The 7th gen Delta 88 began with a 1971 model year, and was the first year that the Delta name became standard across all 88s. This generation, or more specifically the 1973 model, is well known by fans of movies directed by Sam Raimi. The production of Raimi's first movie, The Evil Dead, was so short on funds that he borrowed his dad's 1973 Delta 88 from the movie. Every movie Raimi has directed since then has not just included a 73 Delta 88, but in most cases, they found a way to include the original car, or just parts of it, just enough to say it made it into every movie. Raimi refers to the car as the classic, and although some may say it is most famous for the Evil Dead series,
it's in all 3 Evil Dead movies.
It got more mainstream popularity thanks to the Spider-Man trilogy that began in 2002.
It's in every Spider-Man movie. It's Uncle Ben's car.
With great power comes great responsibility.
It even showed up as recently as 2022 in the Doctor Strange sequel, Multiverse of Madness.
Got a big car sale, so I hired a karate expert to get people into my showroom. All I wanted to do was to chop some prices.
By 1974, the Delta 88 reached its longest length, nearly 19 feet long, along with a new dashboard and mandated 5-mile-an-hour bumpers.
Love the smell of a new car.
Me too.
It also could be optioned with driver and front passenger airbags, one of the first cars to offer them, but almost no one bought them, so the option was dropped soon after. As this was the heart of the gas crisis, the 350 cubic inch 4-barrel rocket V8 could only muster 175 horsepower.
It's really put together, more than just a pretty car.
1975 would be the last year of the Delta 88 convertible, and only 7,200 were built, making it a valuable find today. The final year of the 7th gen, 1976, introduced new rectangular headlamps, which helped to ease the transition to the 8th gen that began in 1977. The 8th gen was about 10 inches shorter, although still huge, at over 18 feet long. This would be the last generation of the Delta 88 that would share the B-body with the Pontiac Bonneville, Buick LeSabre, and the Chevy Caprice and Impala. The B-body was also used for the Oldsmobile Custom Cruiser station wagon.
They you at the drive-thru, okay?
Although it was still possible to buy a Delta 88 with the Oldsmobile Rocket V8, the base engine offering was a Buick V6. Also, some V8s were made by Buick or Chevrolet, the latter leading to some calling their Delta 88 a Chevy-mobile instead of an Oldsmobile. Although Oldsmobile would disclose this in their ads, it became a bit messy for GM, as some owners found out after their purchase that their Oldsmobile didn't have a Rocket V8, but instead had what they considered to be an inferior Chevrolet engine. As a consolation, GM offered these customers extended warranties, or even to swap out the car to one with a genuine Rocket V8, but the latter option required the owner to still pay for the mileage they put on the original car they bought. The 8th gen Delta 88 didn't really look all that different from its GM siblings, so you had to look for the Oldsmobile trademark split grille design. The custom cruiser wagon was even more in common with its Chevrolet, Pontiac, and Buick counterparts, with only different front ends among the 4 brands. GM was well known in the late 70s and 80s for blatant rebadging that diluted the meaning of each brand, so to help promote the new body style, Oldsmobile was able to convince the Indy 500 to make the Delta 88 Coupe the pace car for the 1977 race, and offered replicas for sale, complete with the in-your-face graphics on the doors. Starting in 1979, the top-of-the-line Delta 88 was the Royal Brougham,
Royale with cheese,
which offered extra plush seats, but it was also the last year for the largest 403 cubic inch V8, thanks to fuel economy mandates.
New Oldsmobiles are in early this year.
By 1981, GM's new computer command control helped monitor the air and fuel mixture to improve fuel economy. Starting in 1984, there was no more base model Delta 88, as the only options were the Royale and Royale Brougham. Later that year, the top-of-the-line Royale Brougham LS became the largest rear-drive Oldsmobile available, as the Oldsmobile 98 got downsized and switched to front-wheel drive. But this title as largest Oldsmobile was short-lived, as the Delta 88 was next on the list to get downsized for 1986. The 9th gen Delta 88 that began in 1986 is the one I remember the most as a kid growing up in the 80s. Now on GM's new front-wheel drive H-body platform, the days of the Rocket V8 were gone, replaced by 2 Buick V6s. Although the Rocket V8 wasn't entirely gone from the Oldsmobile lineup, as it remained in the custom cruiser, which was still on the old B-body platform through 1990. The Delta 88 was down to just a sedan or coupe, with the latter shrinking in sales as coupes in general continued their downward sales trend. The Delta name, at least for Oldsmobile, was to me synonymous with the 88. I always remember the two names together. However, for 1989, the badging was officially changed to just 88, although the number on the badging was spelled out, instead of the digits as it had been before. I've always wondered if keeping the Delta within the name during the 1980s was to help avoid possible confusion with the model year, since including the word Delta prevented the name from being read as the 1988 88. Although that doesn't entirely explain why, once the year was greater than the model name, that they decided that 1989 88 now sounded okay.
Oh, you're eating the car! Don't eat the car! Not the car!
This 9th Gen 88 continued through 1991, with a larger 10th Gen model debuting for 1992, and not surprisingly, no longer offering a coupe version. Although the 10th Gen adopted more rounded body panels, as was typical for the 90s, it still was an old nameplate, and like the rest of the Oldsmobile line, was still only appealing to much older buyers. Oldsmobile had a new model intended to bring in younger buyers, which debuted in 1994, the Aurora. The Aurora, which I featured in its own episode a while back, was a huge departure in style for Oldsmobile, and a clear attempt to help save the brand, as sales for Oldsmobile had been on a downward slope for several years. Although the Aurora is often considered the 88's replacement, the 88 lingered on through 1999, so there was considerable overlap for the two models. In 1996, some of the more sporty Aurora features made their way to the top-end 88, renamed the LSS. By 1997, the very long-running Rocket logo was finally replaced on all Oldsmobiles, except for the Regency trim of the 88, where it retained the 98's old front-end design. This was to appease the few remaining Olds 98 buyers, who could no longer buy a 98 after its demise in 1996. In 1999, the 88 marked its final year as the oldest Oldsmobile nameplate, with the next oldest, the Cutlass, ending that same year. The Cutlass suffered a worse fate in its final years, being a near copy of the exceptionally boring Chevy Malibu. The larger 98 was dead back in 1996, so for 2000, Oldsmobile had some relatively fresh options for the new millennium with the Aurora, Intrigue, and the new Alero, but also had two obvious rebadges, the Silhouette minivan and Bravada SUV. But it was pretty much an open secret that their days were numbered, with the last Oldsmobile being the 2004 Alero. Seeing an 88, or even more so a Delta 88, is a rare sight today, at least for me, and I live in the Detroit area, one of the few places you'd think a classic like this could still exist. If you have a Delta 88, or know someone who does, check out my Instagram page and send a photo.
The new Delta 88.
We've had one built for you.
Wish I had an hour to tell you about it.
Oldsmobile. Oh, tell.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, click the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you once owned a car from the 80s to mid-2000s that you rarely see today and would like it featured in a future episode, leave a reply in the comments or contact me at the email shown here. See you next time.
That's the stupidest combination I ever heard in my life. That's the kind of thing an idiot would have on his luggage.